Okay, hello everybody. We're going to give everyone just another minute or two to join the webinar. I know we've got a lot of people that registered, so we're just going to give them another second or two, and then we're going to get started. Okay, I've got a minute after, and that's about all the time that we have to allow people to get in before we get started. So I appreciate you taking time out to spend the next hour with Chad Carlisle and myself. Chad will be behind the scenes fielding questions that you guys have along the way. For those of you who don't know who I am, who maybe haven't been part of one of these webinars before, my name is Anthony Adorno. I am the Director of Consulting Services here at DeGarmo. I usually am a moderator on these events, but I'm actually going to present today, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But again, for those who don't know, my background's in industrial organizational psychology, and for the past 25 years or so, I've been with DeGarmo helping organizations to better understand how to use talent assessments for making strategic decisions about who to hire and how to better develop them. Day to day here, I function primarily as a liaison between our client services, R&D, and technology groups on the development and deployment of our talent solutions. And over the past 2 years, I've spent a lot of time in the OPO space, working on understanding how to leverage behavioral science to try to save more lives. So I'm excited to be here and to be presenting to you all. If you have questions along the way, again, feel free to use the Q&A dialogue or the chat, and Chad will field those in line. Or if he feels like there's something that maybe the entire group could benefit from, he'll pass that along to me. I'm going to preemptively apologize because I am not where I normally sit. I was joking with Chad about this before I started the call. Probably about an hour or so before this meeting began, I was up in my office at home, and I lost all of my external monitors. So I have a primary and then 2 others, and it's hard to do this with just one monitor. So I had to come down into my wife's office, and fortunately she's on site today. And so I'm not familiar with her setup. So just bear with me if for some reason something doesn't go quite right. I'll get it figured out. So I appreciate your patience along the way. So we're here today to talk a little bit about leadership, and the reason that we thought that this particular topic might be especially relevant, pardon me, over the past few months, I've been talking with different OPO leaders about the analytics project that we ran, started back in 2022 and culminated in the presentation that we did, last year, and really just kind of following up and talking about some ongoing analytic work that we could be doing. And one of the things that kind of emerged as a recurring theme was challenges with stability when bringing new supervisors into the organization or hiring FSCs who would be new to supervisory roles, and kind of the instability there, and not necessarily finding people who are the best fit for that job. And I think I had an immediate kind of reaction to why that might be happening, and thought that this topic that we've done some research on in the past might be relevant, not only for the people who are incumbent leaders at various levels in your organizations, but also for FSCs or other people in the organization who might aspire to be leaders in the future. So even if you're not there yet, if it's something that you've been thinking about as part of your career journey, I think some of the things that we're going to be talking about today, some of the key behaviors that really set leaders apart and create this reputation of being high potential and being effective as a leader will be particularly important for you to kind of take in today. From an expectations perspective, I really think that your approach here should be understanding this is foundational information. This is not a leadership development class. We're not going to be doing development exercises. This is really to just kind of set a baseline for understanding the kind of the behavioral DNA that sets leaders apart from others in the organization, or more or less successful leaders. And so I'm going to start by doing something that we haven't done before. So I'm taking a calculated risk. I told Chad I wasn't sure if I was going to do this, but we've adopted some new technology as part of this webinar platform, and so I'm going to give it a go. And hopefully it works out well. And if it doesn't, then we'll figure it out. But I want to start by launching a poll. And as part of this poll, which should pop up on your screens in just a minute, I'd like you to answer this question. And that question is, which of the following would be more likely to cause you to leave a job? A leader who lacks the right technical skills, or a leader who lacks the right interpersonal skills? So go ahead and submit your responses. And we've got 25 in already. Chad, help me. Can you see the responses as they're coming in?
Yes, I see them.
Okay. We won't take very long here. We've got 41 people who have submitted a response already. So, as you can clearly see, I believe everybody can clearly see this. 93% of you say a leader who lacks the right interpersonal skills. And I'm going to close that, and it should be gone now. Chad, is it gone?
It is indeed. Well done.
Okay, good. We're on a roll. So the reason I bring this up is because, a lot of organizations are hiring people because of their technical skills, but they're actually not the best leaders. They're not people who are going to succeed in a leadership capacity because they don't have the right behavioral DNA. So when we look at the data, 57% of employees who quit their jobs are saying it's because of poor leadership. And we're going to get into that in a little bit more detail in just a little bit. 14% revenue growth. So when organizations invest in leadership development, on average, their revenue increases by 14%. Okay, so they're investing in developing stronger leaders who are going to exemplify a lot of the behaviors that we're going to talk about today, and it translates into bottom line performance. Teams that have strong leaders are 30% more likely to achieve their goals. And 75% of people who rate their leaders as highly effective report high levels of job satisfaction. So clearly the business case for focusing on leadership from a hiring and development perspective is clear. The problem is organizations aren't doing a very good job of finding those people. The people who are put into those jobs, for the most part, feel unprepared. 63% of leaders feel unprepared for decision-making and people management, which when I think about leadership, that's what it is. It's making decisions and it's managing people. There are other things along the way, of course, but that's primarily what a leadership job is. It's not actually doing the tasks of the people who you're leading. It's leading the people and making the decisions to support them. And only 10% of organizations feel like they actually have a strong leadership pipeline, that they actually have talent that they can bring up through the organization and achieve the goals that they've set out. Half of leaders fail within the first 18 months of the job, and 82% of those people cite interpersonal skills and inability to manage teams as the reason why. So, the question that we asked a minute ago is really representative of the problem, and that is that leaders today, a lot of leaders today, may have great technical skills. They may really understand how to do the job, but they don't understand how to lead people. And so when we think about that, this seems like a placement issue. So why are organizations missing the mark? Well, a lot of them are just hiring people because they've been there the longest. Tom's been in this job for 5 years and he has the most seniority, so he's the logical choice to be the leader of this team. And Tom's seniority doesn't necessarily translate into leadership effectiveness. People also think because you're really good at this job, you're going to be good as a leader of people in that job, this competence transfer bias. So again, the specific competencies and capabilities that you need to be an effective leader are different from the skills and the competencies that you need to be effective in that job. So just because you're good at that job, just because you're a great FSC today, doesn't mean you're going to be a great leader of FSCs in the future, if that's the path that you decide to pursue. Some organizations are hiring people because they're focusing on results. Again, Sarah had an 82% non-registered DCD auth rate, so she's going to be the next person that we're going to have lead all of our FSCs. Short term, maybe there's some benefit there. Long term, Sarah may not have the capabilities to be an effective leader. Another problem that we see pretty regularly is that, and I'm sure based on conversations that I've had with some of the leaders of your respective organizations, there's not a lot of support for development and growth, and that's unfortunate. That a lot of the organizations are pretty resource thin, that they don't have the capability, the bandwidth to invest in the coaching and development of their people. And when you take somebody who hasn't been a leader before or has very limited leadership experience, and you expect a lot out of them, they're going to struggle. And they're going to be the people who turn over in 18 months because they just don't have what it takes to lead teams effectively. A fifth issue is what we call micromanagement. So again, I was really good in this job, so I'm going to be very hands-on and make sure that you do things exactly the way that I would do them. And that's not leading people. And finally, there's this, especially if you're hiring from another industry into this industry, there's this potential to have a lack of connection to the mission, vision, and values of the organization. And if there's not a real good culture alignment on what's important for success and how we're going to measure that, there's going to be derailment. And so when we're talking about the specific impact along the way within the OPO context, we talk about people who are supervisors of FSCs. These are your folks who are on the front lines managing donation conversations with families, emotionally charged situations. And if you have problems with leadership, if you have a lack of support, if you have inadequate communication, that's going to cause job dissatisfaction. That's going to cause those people to burn out because they don't have the support that they need. And I'm sure some of you maybe are feeling that right now. From a team perspective, if you don't have strong leaders, if they're not passing along clear guidance about expectations, if they're not establishing best practices or standardizing protocols or trying to continually improve as a team, that performance is going to suffer. It's going to impact partnerships. What happens when you don't have a strong leader that's managing relationships with your hospital administrators or your healthcare teams in general. That's going to be problematic. From an innovation perspective, has this industry changed at all recently? I think it has. I think there's been a lot of regulatory changes that have impacted how work gets done and how people perceive kind of the goal and mission and purpose of the organization. There's been a lot of medical advances and how donations can be performed. And if you're not learning from those changes, if you're not trying to embrace innovation and use that to try to grow in the future, you're going to suffer. And the problem is, in this particular industry, if you're not innovating and you're not embracing change, the outcome is really the expense of the lives of other people, which is unfortunate. So I think the case for really understanding what it takes to be successful as a leader is pretty clear. We need to understand what it is, because there are a lot of potential consequences if we don't do that. And so again, the focus of today's talk is going to be about understanding what high potential leadership really means. What are those behaviors that separate the leaders who are really effective in their roles and who can inspire and motivate other people to do the best job that they can, that can rally support around this mission to save lives and in this industry. And so again, as we talk about some of these things, I think kind of baseline. I'm going to talk about a lot of different behaviors, and it's honestly going to be impossible for you to take it all in right now and understand it as it is. And I've got a handout, so a lot of the things that you're going to see on the screen as we go through the balance of this presentation, I'm going to send to you, so you don't have to worry about trying to copiously take notes. And I'd rather you kind of think about the meaning of what some of these behaviors are, and personally, whether you think they represent strengths for you or whether they represent growth opportunities for you. And then we can work on it from there. And so how we got to where we are today, we did this study with many of your organizations 2 years ago now, where we collected a lot of data from FSCs, and we looked to see, what the kind of underlying behavioral characteristics were of those people who were, managing family conversations well and achieving authorization. We were presented with an opportunity to do a similar study years ago on what high potential leadership looks like. And so this was before we've kind of entered this space. And so this model has been out there for 7, 8 years now. And so what we sought out to really understand is how do leaders think about high potential? And what are the specific behaviors that actually correlate with ratings of effectiveness? And so in order to embark on this journey, we first started by doing as much reading as we could on leadership potential and effectiveness in general. We're not the first people to think about what makes a good leader. So there's a lot of really good research out there that we tried to integrate to come up with an integrative model of leadership effectiveness and high potential leadership. And then we engaged organizations across the United States. We were able to gather data from 700 current and future leaders. And that included data from 120 senior leaders in those organizations across the U.S. And as part of that project, not only did we collect all of this behavioral data, but we also collected the data on leadership effectiveness. So again, we're looking at the behavioral moderators of effectiveness. What are the things that set people who are highly rated by their senior leaders as high potential and highly effective? And so we're going to talk about what we call these leadership pillars. So these are ways of classifying leader behavior. So these are higher order constructs. And I'm going to break each of the 4 of these down into their respective components. But when we talk about what leadership potential and high leadership effectiveness looks like, there's really 4 things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about your thinking style, so how you acquire and react to information. We're going to talk about motivation style, which is your interest in learning new information and striving to achieve at higher levels. We're going to talk about your interpersonal style, which is how you connect with other people professionally and really how you treat those people. And then we're going to talk about what we call your strategic management style, which is really how you mobilize the team of people that you work with. And that could be the FSCs that you might be supervising. That could be the entire organization if you're sitting in the C-suite right now. So how are you mobilizing those people, and how are you adapting to the changing nature of demands that you're faced with? So these are kind of the four constructs that we're going to talk about. So the first is thinking style. And here, this is how you interpret and react to information, how you respond to challenges when you're working with others. And everybody approaches challenges and makes decisions differently. These are everything that we're going to talk about today is what we call an individual difference characteristic. Okay, we're all different people. We all have different personalities. We all have different strengths and opportunities. None are better than the others. They're just all different. And some are better aligned to achieving certain objectives, but they're not better or worse traits. So we're different. So as people, we all react to stress differently. We all respond to challenges differently. And so when we talk about thinking style, a lot of this is kind of a cognitive process. You don't really see it, but it's how you perceive information. It's how you analyze data. It's how you respond to complex problems. And so understanding this obviously has implications for everything that you do. That decision-making component that a lot of leaders struggle with. This is where it originates, is how you use information. So we break this out into what we call your approach, which is how you interpret information and make decisions, and your reactions. So how you actually respond to those challenges. So again, from an approach perspective, this is how leaders solve problems. Do they rely on creativity, on logic? How do they frame and explore issues? And how do they ultimately decide on a course of action? And so when we look at this data, having a good approach means, thinking strategically and conceptually, being able to anticipate challenges and opportunities and preemptively address them. I think what's most important is being reflective. So being able to consider a situation, maybe something that has happened recently. Why did it happen? How did you react in that situation? How could you do that differently? You learn to modify your approach over time and across situations. So that's some agility as well. So again, how you take in information and your ability to use that strategically and conceptually. Again, envisioning a future sequence of events and anticipating that appropriately. Then on the other side is how you actually react to that information. So are you emotionally stable? Are you relatively calm? Or are you more volatile? Are you comfortable taking some risks or not? So not everybody is. So this is being emotionally stable, staying calm under pressure, handling challenges with a steady demeanor, and being emotionally resilient. Things aren't always going to go our way, especially as leaders, especially in this space. There's just going to be unexpected complications that come up, and you have to be able to be resilient and to bounce back from those things. So again, it's this having a very strategic and conceptual way of thinking about information and being agile in how you process it and learn from it. And then on the reaction side, being emotionally stable and being resilient and tolerant of some risk. And so, when we look at some of the data, this is I think this is pretty interesting, and the Dan Goldman's work on emotional intelligence that was published back when I was in graduate school, I think is really interesting. Still, 2 million people surveyed, only 36% of people can actually accurately identify their emotions as they occurred, which I find remarkable. The problem is that leaders are really the emotional pulse of the organization. And I'm not just talking about the C-suite, but you as a supervisor, you set the tone for your team. And if you're emotionally unstable, and if you don't react well to stress, that's gonna your team is going to know that. And this goes back to Nika's presentation last month for the FSCs on co-regulation. And so if you're emotionally volatile, you can't expect your team to not respond to that volatility. So, you're the pulse of your team, of your department, of your organization, and you've got to be able to recognize and manage your emotions appropriately. And so, when we started this project years ago, one of the things that I didn't mention when I was describing the research is that this was across just about every industry that you can think of and every level of leadership. So I don't even know if there's questions coming in now about what kind of organizations participated in this project and what level of leadership are we talking about. But again, senior leaders all the way down to supervisors in telecommunications and retail and healthcare and manufacturing. So every organization representing every industry was part of this process. But when I was thinking about this presentation, I wanted to make sure that we can connect it to what you guys do. So when we talk about your approach and we talk about your reactions, what are the things that are relevant for you on a day-to-day basis where you can connect how you acquire and respond to information on a day-to-day basis. So, from a senior leader position or perspective, like fluctuations in staffing volumes. So how many people do we need in order to support our growth? What model are we going to use? Are we going to cross-train people? Are we going to deepen our bench? How are we going to deploy staff given various complications? If you're processing a case or you're with a donation team, what about the complexity of that particular case? The unique demands or ethical considerations for a particular case. So again, there's changes in donor status. There's logistical things that come up. But how are you going to learn from those experiences? How are you going to reflect and learn from and change the way that you process that information and anticipate and be strategic and conceptual about information that you take in the next time? And then how are you going to respond in a more functional way if that is a challenge for you personally? If something comes up where a case didn't work out the way you wanted it to, how are you going to react to that? And how is your team going to react to your reaction? So again, I think there's a lot of relevance for the thinking style pillar for a lot of what you guys do in practice on a day-to-day basis. The second pillar is what we call motivation style. So this is really how you work to develop your skills. It's really the engine that drives us to achieve our goals. And again, just like everything else, it's not the same for everyone. Some people are more intellectually curious than others. And some people are just more achievement oriented than others. And that's going to be a difference maker. And so, it helps us, kind of recognize how we set priorities, how high we set the bar for ourselves and for other people, and how much we really want to learn and strive, which are the two facets of this pillar, into the future. So when we talk about learning, it's really it's desire for growth and development. Okay, I'm not going to be stagnant. Sure, I've got this certification, or I've finished graduate school, or whatever, however you benchmark your level of learning to date. what else have you done? What else have you done to try to take in additional information? And so highly effective and high potential leaders are people who are constantly trying to expand their knowledge and skills. They are very curious. They're taking advantage of opportunities. They're collaborating with other people who might know more than them, who they can learn from. They want to be intellectual sponges. And again, there's a lot of things that are changing in the industry. And if you're not willing to put yourself in a position where you are going to be an agile learner, it's going to be difficult for you to succeed as a leader. Because of the changing nature of regulatory issues and all of the things that you guys are well aware of. And so acquiring and developing your knowledge base is kind of one part. But then what else are we doing to set a high bar to manage those opportunities that we have in front of us? And so when we talk about striving, this is really, it's achievement orientation. It's setting high goals, overcoming obstacles. It's being innovative. It's leveraging influence where you can, having a motivation to lead, initiating activities, not waiting for things to happen to you, but making them happen. And so, when we look at like learning agility, for example, people who have high learning agility are twice as likely to advance in their careers than people who have low learning agility. So going out and trying to learn more, to take in information, process that, apply it to what you do on a day-to-day basis is going to determine whether or not and how far you may ultimately make it as a leader. And, as it says here, the research shows that learning agile leaders are rated as more competent, as having more potential, getting promoted faster, getting promoted more often, and outperforming their peers after a promotion. So it's invaluable to just have this intellectual curiosity and this drive to achieve. So your motivation style is real important. And so when we did this research, one of the things that we asked people is, how many high-profile projects have you volunteered for in the past 5 years? So think about that from an intellectual curiosity perspective. Think about that as maybe taking a stretch assignment, something outside of your comfort zone to learn other parts of the business. Then we looked at the frequency with which that occurred against their ratings of leader effectiveness or leadership potential. And so this is actually structured where the longest bar, again, the bars represent ratings of low potential from senior leaders. So people, and again, they didn't have access to this information. We just asked them to rate all of their leaders. And then we looked at this biographical data that we had separately collected from those leaders. And people who were rated as low weren't volunteering. They weren't taking opportunities to try to learn more about their job or other areas of the business to strengthen their understanding of how to be as successful as they possibly could be. We also asked, how many people have you formally or even informally mentored over the past 5 years? Okay. Those people, now this is high leadership potential. There were a tremendous number of people that had mentored 6 or more people in 5 years, or had been, whether it's formal or informal, and those were the people who were rated as having high leadership potential. So you think about that collaboration. They're out there trying to share information and develop the people who they work with. So again, it's this intellectual curiosity, it's this drive to achieve. So learning and striving from an applications and practice perspective for you all. I think there's been a tremendous amount of innovation in the past few years in the OPO space, whether it's perfusion or preservation techniques, changes to how organs are allocated, to timing on when we speak to families, if it's earlier in the process, from a business intelligence perspective, how are we using data to make decisions? So just this data intelligence and data informed decision making. So there's a lot of new and different things that are constantly evolving in this space. And so those of you who are putting yourself in a position to better understand those changes and to learn from them are going to be in a better position to achieve higher levels of leadership, if that's what you aspire to. But even if that isn't part of your career path, if you're doing these things, you can be a more effective leader at the level you are today. If you don't want to climb the corporate ladder, so to speak. The third pillar is what we call interpersonal style, and this I think is the most visible. Okay, you see this, like you can't really see somebody's thinking style. You can't really see their motivation style, but you understand how you connect with other people, how you treat them, how you engage with the people around you. And so, as we talked about earlier, leadership's not just about making decisions, but it's also about how you work with other people. So how you connect and how you communicate and how you build relationships. This is a vital part of leadership effectiveness. And, obviously in this space, collaboration and trust are critical and can make a significant difference in your team dynamics, in engaging employees, and ultimately in organizational effectiveness. So this is I think a hugely important pillar in general. And it's comprised of these two facets that we call connecting and respecting. So connecting is, this ability to build strong relationships, to be approachable and empathetic, to understand and address and respond to the needs of other people, and making people feel heard and feel valued. So people who have a strength in this facet are going to be great networkers. They're going to go out and they're going to try to build relationships. They're going to seek out relationships with other people. They're going to be a lot more comfortably assertive. They're going to be able to share their opinions to other people in a way that is confident, but also is sensitive to the thoughts and feelings of other people. So they're going to be good communicators, and they're also going to be, the other side of this is again this notion of considering others' opinions and viewpoints and having a kind of a respectful orientation. So being warm and friendly and trusting when dealing with other people, being very inclusive. Obviously, we know the importance of empathy. So again, this is respecting is really kind of this notion of honoring the dignity and the perspective of other people. And so if you can be good at connecting with other people, building a network, and have a strength in treating people with respect, you're going to have a strong interpersonal style from a leadership perspective. So how does this apply in practice for you all today? Obviously, I think some of these things are pretty obvious. You're dealing with families on a day-to-day basis, and you've got to be able to connect with a wide variety of people who are in various emotional states, who are at some of the lowest points of their lives. And as leaders, you're leading the teams of people who are responsible for managing those conversations. You're managing your own teams. So this ability to connect with your team, to treat them with a level of respect, to hear them, to be inclusive of them is paramount. Connecting to other, hospital staff that are your partners in this process is also paramount. So again, I don't think we can overstate the importance of this pillar in terms of the OPO space specifically, but just leadership in general, because it's probably the most visible of the pillars when we think about what makes a good leader. The fourth is probably the one that people think about the most when you think about leadership. It's just what we call this strategic management style. So it's what you think of when you think of leadership. It's how you influence other people. It's how you encourage them and get them to rally around your mission, your vision, your values. It's more than just this kind of day-to-day management notion, but it's being a lot more strategic where this comes into play. And so it's this ability to plan and to execute, to set long-term goals and achieve them, to get your team to see the big picture, and to inspire them to really achieve more than they can achieve by themselves, to create this sense of synergy. And of course, there's two ways that we kind of define this. And the first is what we call mobilizing, supporting, encouraging others to achieve important goals. So this, again, the notion here is rallying people around a common goal. So if you're a good mobilizer, you're going to have a good sense of the dynamics of your team. You're going to understand how to work with people individually to share this vision and to get everybody working together kind of in sync. And that's empowering them. So that's allowing them to make decisions and accept the outcomes of those decisions, giving them some autonomy to do that, not being a micromanager. Again, inspiring people to perform at higher levels, holding people accountable for their levels of performance, and being very supportive along the way. Being kind of sensitive to how people are responding to your leadership, your leadership approach. So again, the whole notion here is just driving engagement and collaboration, and ultimately rallying people around your vision as a leader. Again, whether that's for a supervisory role, or whether that's at higher levels of the organization. And then this notion of adapting. So being flexible and responsive in the face of challenges. There's, as we are well aware, and as we've already discussed, the landscape is changing. And so you've got to be, as a leader, you've got to be able to change with it. So you've got to be able to navigate these situations and adjust your style based on who you're talking with. And those challenges are sometimes unexpected. And we've already talked about emotional resiliency. But you've got to be able to make these decisions on the fly. You've got to be able to use the information, to be able to use your thinking style, to take the information that you've learned, that you've reflected on, that you've now incorporated into how you think about doing things, and adapt that in real time. So again, there's this notion of versatility. We've got to be able to inspire and motivate people, but we've got to be versatile in how we do that. And taking this home, when we talk about the variations in leadership performance, 67% of that variation is due to behavioral factors. Okay, so it's not technical skill. It's not whether you can do the job. It's how you're going to go about doing it. And so at some level, being trained to be an expert in something, to be a clinical expert, doesn't necessarily translate into being a good leader. And so I think we kind of hammered this point home that if you're going to fail as a leader, it's not because you don't understand the technical aspect of the job. It's because you don't understand the interpersonal demands that come along with it. And so this is a really important mission for anybody who is a leader now. And hasn't really thought about what leadership really means. You're sure you hold team meetings, but what are you doing to create a shared vision? How are you rallying the troops around that vision? And so again, from an applications and practice perspective, this is really about inspiring your teams. What are we doing to move the needle on donation rates? Obviously, there's a lot of regulatory changes that the industry has had to respond to. We know there's some some more pressure now than there might have been in the past. But, as a leader, we've got to be able to innovate. We've got to be able to think about how to do things differently, to set really high goals, even if you don't know how you're going to achieve them. Set a goal and work to achieve it. Figure it out along the way. But you can't be complacent. And it's all of these things together that that drive effectiveness and that are associated with leadership potential. And so one of the things that I'm interested in, we've talked about, again, some of the more hidden aspects of leadership, your thinking style, your motivation style, which aren't necessarily as visible to other people. And then you've got the interpersonal style and your strategic management style. So now I'm curious, and I'm going to do this again. I'm going to open one more poll. And when we did this research, we looked at the correlations between those 4 leadership pillars and senior leaders' ratings of potential. So what I'd like you guys to do is tell me what you think which pillar correlates the strongest with leadership potential. Okay. So it looks like most of you said interpersonal style. We've got some that were relatively split between motivation and strategic management for second place, and thinking style came in last. And let me just make sure that this is closed. Chad, is that closed? Are we just seeing my? All right, thank you. So drum roll. The style that has the strongest correlation with leader effectiveness is interpersonal style. So I think my emphasis on the importance of interpersonal style and its visibility hit home. And in particular, we actually looked at the 8 individual components that comprise the 4 pillars, and the connecting facet of the interpersonal style had the strongest correlation with ratings of leadership potential and effectiveness. So if those facets are not your strengths, if connecting and respecting and the behaviors that comprise those aren't things that you think you excel at, and you aspire to be a leader in the future, or you want to be a more effective leader today, it's time to start focusing on developing yourself in those areas. So where do we go from here? How do we take this information and potentially use it down the road? And so, again, I started out by saying that this is going to be foundational information. This is not a leadership development course. This is really just designed to help you start thinking a little bit differently about what it means to be a leader from an interpersonal perspective, and to potentially identify some of your own strengths and opportunities. And then if you want to work on a development plan to address those things, I think that's great. But just for just as an example, we've got some development actions that are exemplars of things that you might do for each of these 4 pillars. And there's a whole bunch, but these are just a few examples. So from a thinking style perspective, I was talking about how being reflective is especially important, and it's something that I think is readily achievable. Okay, so it's more challenging to start thinking strategically. It's more challenging to be a very conceptual thinker. Some people that comes more naturally to than others, but we all have the ability to look back at a situation that has occurred and to break down that situation into its components and to think about what happened and to try to learn from that. So if you want to learn to be a better thinker and you want to learn how to process and use information differently, you've got to look back at what happened in the past, because the best predictor of what's going to happen in the future is what's happened in the past. And so if you can learn from what you've done in the past and try to make changes, that can help change, how you approach similar situations in the future. From a motivation perspective, set goals. Everybody on the call has heard about goal setting theory, I'm sure. And so we're not going to teach you about goal setting theory. If you want, let us know. There'll be a survey after this, and you're free to request that. But again, set learning goals. Go outside of your comfort zone. If you are not a leader today, if you're an FSC and you want to be a supervisor, learn more about what that job requires. Learn more about the day-to-day demands that a leader faces, the challenges that they have, not only managing the team, but the other things that they have to do. So learn about the regulatory changes, learn about the changes in how donors are managed, learn about how to create better relationships with your partners, whether it's healthcare teams or hospital administration. Like, put yourself out there and, maybe look for a mentor, somebody who might be able to provide you with some information that would be invaluable to your growth and development. From an interpersonal style perspective, try to build your relationships. Not everybody is really comfortable networking, going out and meeting new people. Again, this is, we've said that this is your interpersonal style is the most influential when it comes to ratings of leader effectiveness and future potential. So you've got to develop a comfort with that. And so, invest your time in trying to build relationships, and whether that's, check-ins or just, getting to know people personally, spend more time doing that. And then finally, from a strategic management perspective, think about embracing change. Well, how can you do a better job of creating a mindset that allows you to be open to innovation, to think differently about, maybe how things should be done in the future. It's just not necessarily how they were done in the past. So see these changes as opportunities for growth, and try to figure out how to embrace them and leverage them in the future. So again, that's a little bit about high potential leadership. Again, the kind of the goal here was just to raise some awareness. It all, again, originated with this notion of hiring people into jobs and having some failures as a result. And so from a baseline perspective, I think this at some level, for some of you, helps you better think about how those hiring decisions are made. But I think for most of you, it's really about, how can I be a better leader? How can I strengthen my approach so that I can be as effective as I can be in supporting my team, or down the road, if that's something that you desire to do in the future. As I mentioned, I do have a handout. So anybody who's on the call today that registered and attended, I'll send the handout. And really what it is it's the 4 pillars, and then it's the 8 slides that break down those key behaviors. So each pillar has 2 key behaviors that have a number of other supporting behaviors. And so all that can, if you want it, I'll send it out. And as I mentioned, there'll be a survey after this. So if you have other, questions or concerns, or you want to learn more about this or something else related to it, just let us know, and it could be a future session. We've got about 5 minutes or so left. And so if there are any questions, I'll go ahead and field them now. Chad, anything that's come in? Again,
Yeah, there was one. There's one question. Nathan asked a good question, though. To be fair to Nathan, he asked it before you got to the strategic management style portion. So I'll ask it, and you can see if you want to add on to it. But the question was, how does the model account for circumstantial variation in the situations that leaders face, such as high stress situations versus low stress, one-on-one versus managing group dynamics. So if you have any other thoughts around that, I mentioned that to sit tight for strategic management style was sort of the adapting behaviors, but feel free to add on.
Yeah, no, thanks. And that's really what it is. And so, so hopefully, Nathan, kind of seeing some of this information addresses, how that's relevant. And so we're not operating in a vacuum as leaders. We need to be able to constantly evolve our approach in managing team dynamics and incorporating change as a function of other contextual variables along the way. And so, and again, just because we say it's important doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. And so some people are going to be a little bit better at being able to adapt and incorporate new information and to modify their approach, their leadership approach, based on the nuances of those situations. So again, it is this transformative concept that we're not necessarily going to be where we are all the time, and we need to be able to take in information and adapt and respond to whatever the information or contextual variables are that dictate what we should do. So I know it's kind of a high level general response to that, and happy to talk with you offline on it a little bit more if you want. Anything else?
One other question I got in the Q&A, but I'll just, Kimberly had a nice note here just saying we need to meet our staff where they are the same as we coach to meet the families where they are and adapt from there. So I think it's a great comment about applying that concept that they teach, that you teach FSCs to focus on in terms of meet families where they are. Also need to meet staff where they are. So good comment. But there's one other question that came up separately in the Q&A that I think was just asking for a little more, maybe a comment or just a little more context around the idea of when we think about this model, is there a certain level or years of experience that we think this model applies to in terms of minimum required, or is this something that we can think of that can be applicable to, as you've mentioned, if there are FSCs on the call, all the way to folks who maybe have been leading maybe they've been in a leadership role for 10 plus years?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And unfortunately, we only had an hour, but there's just a lot more data from that project that I would have loved to share with the group. And so from a biographical perspective, we collected a lot of other information from organizations when we did this project. And one of the pieces of data that we collected was the number of years of experience that a leader has, and how that kind of correlates with their ratings of leader effectiveness. And there's no correlation. So just because you've been a leader for a long time doesn't mean you're good at it. And we do a lot of interview training, and so the concept is parallel there. Like, just because you've been interviewing for a long time doesn't make you a good interviewer. And so there are these key behaviors that you can operationalize that define more and less effective ways of being an interviewer, or more effective ways of being a leader. And so it's not necessarily only relevant for supervisors or managers or directors or senior leaders. These things transcend, these behaviors can be operationalized at every level of leadership. It's just a matter of how you think about it in your specific role. But yeah, your number of years of leadership doesn't correlate with your effectiveness. Neither does the size of the team that you lead. I'm trying to think of some of the other data. One of the things that correlated with leadership potential was your openness to relocate for a new leadership opportunity. And this may seem like an obvious one. Your interest in being a leader. So we actually asked people if they were interested in being a leader, and there was a very strong correlation between leader effectiveness and leader potential and their interest in being a leader. And the reason that I bring that up is because a lot of people are promoted into positions that they don't necessarily want to have. Everybody thinks it's the next step for them, But if they don't really want to be there, they're not going to be effective in that job. And so we collected that data, and we found that to be true as well. So for what that's worth. Okay, it looks like we're at the top of the hour. I do appreciate everybody's time today. As promised, I'll send out copies of the handouts. And I know it was a lot of information to take in one session. Thanks for sticking with me and being good listeners. And if there are other questions that you think about, once we end here, feel free to reach out to me personally. So again, thanks for your time. Thanks for your interest, and we'll see you next time.